Hello everyone, back tuning into today's second video. We're going to have a look at the weather for the next week to 10 days, or today's second video. That's going to take us to around the 6th or 7th of January. We'll be able to extend out beyond that with the extended GFS and ECM ensembles. They run to around a couple of weeks. Have a look at CFSV2 for January, the whole month, at the end of the video. Talking of the CFS in January, we just released JMA Friday, so that's the month they'd look at, which takes us into the second half of January with the Japanese and CFSB2 models. It looks like it could be a very, very mild start to January. Have a look at that and see what's going on there. We will touch on that for this video as well. Maybe not quite as mild, actually, in the next week or so, as the sort of model output is themed. But more about that later in the video. We're going to begin, though, in the stratosphere. Thought we'd have a look at that for the start of today's video. So this is from the JMA. This is the current temperature at 10 HPA over the North Pole versus the trend this time of year. So 10 HPA is an area in the top of the atmosphere that we call the stratosphere. So it's above the troposphere. The troposphere is the boundary level of the atmosphere where weather takes place. The stratosphere is even higher up than that. And if we want northern blocking and colder conditions to appear, we need to get a sudden stratospheric warming a lot of the time. Though not all the time is that the case. So sometimes you can have very cold weather. For example, December 2010, there was no warming of the stratosphere involved with the December to remember. Actually, stratospheric temperatures were around average, or actually a little bit on the cold side that month. But we did come away with a phenomenally cold month in December 2010, as we know. However, generally, most of the time, there are exceptions, but generally, most of the time, our coldest weather seems to come a few weeks after a major warming of the stratosphere, something that we call a sudden stratospheric warming. So, where we are right now, the black line, of course, shows where the temperature has been through this season so far. So, we begin in September, and that's where we are right now. So, the temperature is come up actually a little bit, 10 HPA, compared to where it was a few days ago. We was at or below minus 80 a few days ago. It's come up a little bit, somewhere around minus 75 or minus 70, minus 72, 3, something like that. But it's still below average. It's still colder than average. We see that from the grey line, of course, just there. So temperatures are colder than average, yes, at 10 HPA, but have come up a little bit over the past few days. If we go a bit lower down towards the troposphere, let's go to 30 HPA. And again, we've got the same idea here. The grey line is the trend line for this time of year, so temperatures generally at their coldest now on average, and then they lift up, of course, through the first 6 months of the following year. So, but we see from black line that we're actually colder than that. We're colder than the than average at 30 HPA in the troposphere. So we're under minus 80. That's come up a little bit from where it was a few days ago. That's where it bottoms out just there, around minus 85. We're probably around minus 82, something like that, at 30 HPA. But we're certainly colder than average. So at both levels, 30 HPA and also 10 HPA in the stratosphere, we are still colder than average. Now, when we get a sudden stratospheric warming, what will happen, which looks very dramatic, is that within a few days, this black line will sort of shoot up to around here. That sort of level. They always look really, really dramatic when they happen. And a few weeks after that, so 2 to 3 weeks after getting a sudden stratospheric warming, we can sometimes generate high pressure and blocking in the North Pole. And of course, blocking in the Arctic. Blocking is a route pushing cold air out of the pole and down into mid-latitudes. It doesn't happen all the time, though. Last year, around this time last year, actually, between Christmas and New Year, we actually had a very big sudden stratospheric warming. But didn't seem to result in all that much northern blocking, actually. There wasn't a huge tropospheric response. It did get colder through the second half of January last year. I'm sure you remember. There was a little bit of snow. But for how intense that warming of the stratosphere was, that took place around this time last year. Actually, the tropospheric response was relatively muted. So it's not a guarantee of anything, but as I say, a lot of our coldest conditions do seem to follow sun and stratospheric warmings. Not always the case, though. Sometimes we don't get a tropospheric response. That happened last winter, and sometimes we can have very cold conditions like we did in the December to remember without any sort of sudden stratospheric warming. Right, so this is at metroseal.fr, and this is showing the current temperature at 10 HPA over the Arctic. So where we've got these blue and purple colours, these are in fact the cold temperatures at 10 HPA over the Arctic and also over the North Pole. See, the cold conditions are minus 80 or lower, pushed over towards our side of the Arctic actually, so from Greenland to sort of Svalbard. That's where the coldest of those temperatures are. And going towards the North Pole itself has lifted up a little bit to around minus 72. We see that just there. I just highlight it. We see that. Let's change the colour as well to turn it red. So around there would be more or less where the actual North Pole itself is. And we saw from here, 10 HPA, we're around minus 72, something like that. So that does tally up with what we're just looking at. Right, so let's move through then and see what happens in terms of these temperatures at 10 HPA. Remember, we're looking for a sudden stratospheric warming. Now, we do start to generate around New Year's Day quite a pronounced warming of the stratosphere over Siberia just here, where we've got these green, yellow and faint orange colours. This is not quite reaching the required temperature threshold, but I would class as a sudden stratospheric warming. But it is a major warming of the stratosphere that's taking place there over Siberia. Does that get anywhere into the Arctic? Well, that's how we're looking as we get to the 4th of January. So yes, it is starting to push in towards the top of the Arctic a little bit. Generally still, though, it's over on the Siberian side of the Arctic. If we have a look at the extended range with the GFS, that's how it's looking. So again, if we can just run through. So it intensifies further, goes up to around 12 Celsius by day, 6th of January over Siberia. It's still having a job though, isn't it, to push into the Arctic and the North Pole itself. It's still generally confined to Siberia. As we go into the second week of January, it looks like the GFS actually fades it away and moves those cold temperatures back actually in towards the North Pole itself. So the hints are still there of quite a significant warming of the stratosphere, possibly just around borderline sudden stratospheric warming levels over Siberia through the first week of January, but not really moving into the Arctic or the North Pole, and quite quickly fading out. So that is not going to be enough to knock out the polar vortex at its roots in the stratosphere, where we've got these cold temperatures. That won't be enough. Of course, it may be followed by a further significant warming, but on its own, that is not going to be enough. If it happens like that, it won't be enough to knock out the polar vortex. We're looking to sort of rip these blue and purple colours apart, which is what can happen, and that sort of destroys the polar vortex at its roots in the stratosphere. That's what can happen when you get a very significant sudden stratospheric warming. That was a GFS, but this is UCMWF. I'm not showing you this so far this season. So this is from the University of Berlin. Again, we're looking at 10 HPA. It's a forecast based on yesterday's ECMWF run. Now, this makes it a little bit easier to see where the North Pole itself is. So where we've got that black cross just there, that is where the North Pole itself is, over the in the centre of the Arctic. So we've got these blue colours, of course. Those are the cold temperatures at 10 HPA. We've already established it is a little bit cold now, but still over the North Pole at 10 HPA. It's a bit warmer, 10 HPA, on the Pacific side of the Arctic. So that's how the situation is today. It was generated yesterday, but that's the forecast chart for today, 27th of December. If we go through 244 hours, which yesterday was going to be for New Year's Day. We can see that it remains cold New Year's Day over the North Pole, but we are beginning to see a little bit of a warming taking place over towards Siberia, so that sort of ties in with what we're just looking at from the GFS. And that, by the time we get through to day 10, 240 hours away, which gets us, yesterday, got us to the 5th of January, that intensifies further. So, yes, quite a significant warming up of stratosphere taking place over Siberia, going up to around minus 20. Again, we see the North Pole itself, though, still looking quite cold with those blue colours around that black cross. So that's sort of minus 60 to minus 70, something like that. So the ECM is also going for quite a pronounced warming of the stratosphere over Siberia, but whether this actually impacts the North Pole itself, the Arctic itself, does remain to be seen. One thing that is quite interesting is what's going on at 1 HPA. So 1 HPA is kind of like at the very, very top of the stratosphere. It's about as high as you can go to still remain within the stratosphere. So that's how the temperatures are currently looking at 1 HPA. This is for this was generated yesterday, 26th of December. So again, that's how temperatures are looking right now. Generally a little bit on the cold side still across the Arctic and North Pole, 1 HPA. But that's how things look by the time we get through to day 10, 240 hours, 5th of January. Looks much, much warmer, doesn't it? Compared to where we're starting off at 1 HPA, to where we are in 10 days' time. We've got this very dramatic orange and red area appearing here, virtually over the top of the North Pole. It's a little bit over towards sort of Scandinavia and northern Russia and western parts of Siberia. But nevertheless, it's very close to the North Pole. That is a very dramatic warming that's taking place at 1 HPA. It's probably going up to around 0 degrees. Again, from where we start off at, in 10 days, that is very dramatic. This is right at the very top of the stratosphere, but sometimes when the very top of the stratosphere warms up like this, it can be a precursor to a sudden stratospheric warming occurring in the 10 to 30 HPA level of the atmosphere. So it could, doesn't always work out like this, but that could be the beginnings of a sudden stratospheric warming later into January. It'll probably be a week or two further on, but that might be at 1 HPA the start of something very significant beginning to happen. And if we do get a sudden stratospheric warming following that in January, I suspect it will be, I mean, that's like the 5th of January, so it'll probably be around the middle of January. So let's say another week to 10 days after that. But something quite dramatic could happen in the 10 to 30 HPA level of the stratosphere. So it'll be something to keep an eye on as we go into January, and we'll just have to see what happens. But that does look that's a very significant warming that's taking place at 1 HPA, right at the very top of the stratosphere. There's no getting away from that. That won't have any impacts at 1 HPA, too high up. It won't have any impacts on the weather and on the troposphere in its own terms, but it could be the precursor to a sudden stratospheric warming happening a bit lower down in the 10 to 30 HPA level of the stratosphere, like in a week or two further on from that. So we shall see. We'll be keeping a close eye on this, of course, as we go through the course of January. Right, these are the GFS upper air temperature and precipitation ensembles for the next couple of weeks. We're at Northampton today, very local to me. So red line is a 30-year upper air temperature average for Northampton. We're starting off significantly milder than average, but it doesn't particularly feel it. It's actually quite a grey, chilly sort of day today, but we're significantly above average in terms of the upper air temperatures. They're going to increase further as we move towards the new year, becoming exceptional, but a little bit of a dip down around New Year's Eve before they pick up again into the opening days of January. And then after that, just generally above average, generally milder than average, going from the first week into the second week of January. There is quite a bit of scatter in there. So again, we see that we've got these very mild ensemble members up here, got cold ensemble members down there, and some of these ensemble members are going from mild to cold. For example, the operational run itself is dim out. We'll have a look at it in a moment. The operational run is a thick green line. It's very mild just there. It's much colder though just there. Then it's very mild again just there. Then it's colder again just there. So some of those on some members are up and down. Overall, though, it looks like a relatively mild, in terms of the upper air temperatures anyway, relatively mild first 10 days or so of January. It looks like these charts are going to keep refreshing as we go along, so that's quite annoying. Temperature anomalies from the 27th of December to the 4th of January above average. Going to be a milder than average week coming up. Precipitation anomalies, that one didn't refresh, did it? Precipitation anomalies from the 27th of December to 4th of January, drier than average, substantially so. But England and Wales, in fact, virtually no measurable rain there for England and Wales in the next week, if that is right. Which is remarkable given how wet it's been over the past few weeks. That's how the GFS is looking for Monday, pulling up a very mild southwesterly wind. Southwesterly winds are wafting up the air from the Azores on Monday. There's the upper air temperatures. We're bringing the 10 Celsius isotherm into Cornwall. That is exceptionally mild for an upper air temperature for the 30th of December. But will it be all that mild on the surface? Have a look at the surface temperatures in a moment. Looks like there's some sort of trough feature there on New Year's Eve. That might bring a little bit of showery rain across the country, and then the high pressure rebuilds as we go through into New Year's Day. So it looks like it's going to be relatively settled a couple of days for New Year's Eve and for New Year's Day. Then the high pressure begins to slip away to the southeast with a bit more influence from low pressure out to the northwest as we go through the opening days of January. However, there's enough high pressure still close to the south to keep much of England and Wales mainly dry anyway. Will be a little bit more unsettled up in the north. Heading towards day 10, that's how we're looking. So this is a classic sort of zonal scenario. I did the video yesterday saying that zonality is going to rule the roost, and that's definitely very zonal up to 10 days out. High pressure is reaching from the Azores into France, Spain and Portugal, and low pressure is up towards Greenland, Iceland with the polar vortex. I mean, it doesn't get any more zonal than that. That is exceptionally zonal and westerly, southwesterly, and it's pretty mild as well, bringing the air in from the central Atlantic. In the extended range, the 6 o'clock GFS run does start to turn a little bit cold. We saw that on the ensemble, of course, for Northampton, so it does start to go a little bit colder in the extended range. We just start to keep the jet stream out a little bit further southwards, possibly bring some slightly colder air into the north in particular. Still unsettled though, and probably getting wetter actually as we move into the second week of January, with these areas of low pressure deepening, bringing further bands of rain across the country, I would have thought. And quite cool temperatures would be likely as well with that. Just go back to the ensemble a moment. So I didn't talk about precipitation. So it looks pretty dry, doesn't it, actually, for the next few days. So that's where we're starting off at. There is a little bit of rain possible on New Year's Eve, just there. But overall, it looks like the next week is generally shaping up to be quite dry for some of the eastern parts of the country. And even in the extended range, it's not overly wet. There are precipitation spikes that are there as we go towards the second week of January, but not overly wet at all. So it does look as though we're going into a significantly drier spell of weather. Have we sort of turned the corner on the deluge? We'll have to wait and see about that. So let's have a look at these surface temperatures then. We've established we're going to get exceptionally mild upper air temperatures in the coming days. But what's happening on the surface? So this is the temperature forecast of the GFS for today. So it is very mild out in the west today. Northern Ireland, southwest England, southwest Wales up to 10, 11, 12 degrees. But for most parts of the country, actually, it's quite a grey, chilly sort of day, as I said. Despite that, the upper air temperatures are very mild today. Surface temperatures are only around 7, 8 or 9 degrees for England and Wales, and a bit cold now actually for Northern England and for Scotland. So tonight it remains mildest out in the west. All areas look like they're going to be pretty mild though tonight, generally frost-free with temperatures holding up in mid-single digits. Tomorrow is a milder day, temperatures up to 9, 10, 11 degrees quite widely across central parts of England and Wales, although east areas are nearer normal. Very mild across Northern Ireland, Wales, southwestern England overnight Saturday into Sunday. A little bit cooler in the southeast corner, however, again, generally most places frost-free, mildest in the west once more. These are the afternoon temperatures for Sunday, though. Now, this is when the upper air temperatures are just about at their warmest, as we established. Around Sunday, Monday, we're getting up to around 10 Celsius at 850 HPA. It is very mild for the west, so Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, where I know I have quite a few people watching, into 10, 11, 12, 13 degrees there. But to be honest, it doesn't look all that mild for England and Wales, given the high level of upper air temperatures. I mean, we're up to around 7, 8 degrees as a maximum. You can probably add a degree or two on to that, so I would suggest 10 Celsius is possible from some parts of England and Wales, which is quite mild. Yes, it's above average, certainly, but it's not exceptionally mild, as you might expect, given the upper air temperatures. So there is a little bit of a discrepancy here between what's happening in the upper atmosphere, where it is going to be exceptionally mild, and what's happening on the surface, where it's not going to be, I mean, it's going to be a bit milder than average, but it's not going to be exceptional. This southeast corner actually looks a little bit on the chilly side on Sunday. Sunday night goes quite cold. Look at that, we're down to around 1, 2, 3 degrees here across parts of central England. That's probably cold enough for a ground frost. And then Monday, again, upper air temperatures at this point are sort of 10 Celsius at 850 HPA. Surface temperatures, though, 6, 7, 8 degrees, looking quite chilly on the surface. Even parts of Northern Ireland turning a little bit colder on Monday. This is a hint of an inversion, I think, beginning to take place. And what happens with an inversion is that it gets colder on the surface than it is aloft. And that's something that you always have to take into account at this time of year, when you've got high pressure around with warm upper air temperatures. It's not necessarily reflected on the surface. Getting quite cold again on Monday night into the early hours of New Year's Eve. Could be cold enough for ground frost in some parts of central England. New Year's Eve looking about average really, with temperatures quite cold up across Scotland, near normal elsewhere, 6, 7 degrees, but certainly nowhere near as mild as the upper air temperatures are. Could be a widespread frost then overnight New Year's Eve into New Year's Day, so this suggests skies clear, and we probably get some clearer skies in the early hours of New Year's Day, which could allow a widespread frost to develop. New Year's Day actually showing up to be quite a cold day on this particular GFS run, only sort of 4, 5, 6 degrees at best. Another frost possible overnight New Year's Day into the 2nd of January. And then beyond that, into the second half of next week, it does start to get milder then. These are the temperatures in the early hours of Friday, the 3rd of January, looking much milder then. So eventually we do go into a genuinely much milder type temperature. That's afternoon temperatures for Saturday, 4th of January, widely up into double digits. So eventually we do go to a much milder spell of weather as we establish a stronger westerly wind, and that allows those warm upper air temperatures to impact the surface. But around the new year anyway, it doesn't look anywhere near as mild as you might have thought it would be, given those high levels of upper air temperatures. This is how the GM is looking. So Monday, again, we're pulling up this long fetch southwesterly. Looks like it would be an exceptionally mild day. As we've established, it might not necessarily be all that mild. That's New Year's Eve through to New Year's Day. Strong sort of anticyclonic influences. That's Thursday, 2nd of January. Again, we're bringing up the southwest wind. It's a stronger wind too, so that stirs up the air in the north. That would be genuinely mild for northern parts of the country. Probably still a little bit on the cool side for England and Wales. Then it goes a bit more unsettled around the 3rd to the 4th of January. We drop a low pressure and a trough in from the northwest. That turns things a little bit more unsettled and slightly cooler as well. High pressure comes back in for the 5th of January. We're in relatively cool air though, and as we get through to day 10, which is the 6th of January, we're under high pressure away from Scotland, so mainly dry again, but probably quite cold, especially so for England and Wales. ECM looks like that. Southwesterlies on Monday. Technically, it should be a very mild day, particularly for England and Wales. It might not necessarily be all that mild though. New Year's Eve through to New Year's Day, lots of anticyclonic influences, but there could be some showery bursts down in the south and the southwest. Second half next week, we bring low pressure in from northwest. That's probably a band of rain moving southeastwards across the country on Friday, the 3rd of January, which could be a very mild day. Turns cooler behind it. And then moving up towards day 10, where we keep the pattern going, really lots of high pressure through central parts of Europe into towards the south and southeast. That's where it's likely to be coolest, most unsettled and mildest up to the north and west. Again, this looks very zonal with winds in from the west or the southwest. These are the options that are on the table within the East Ensembles today for day 10, which gets us to the 6th of January. So we have 14 members of the East Ensembles that have high pressure over the top of the country. They're going to be mainly dry and settled. 10 with high pressure just to our south-southeast. Low pressure is up to the north. A little bit more unsettled for Scotland, mainly dry elsewhere. That should be quite a mild scenario. 8 with high pressure actually centred over top of the country. So that's likely to be dry and frosty. 7 taking the high pressure just a little bit further eastwards and allowing winds to pull in from the east perhaps a little bit. So that could be a colder scenario. A bit more of a continental influence. 7 with high pressure over and to the south of the country. Going to be pretty mild with those winds in from the southwest, and that does include the control and the operational run. And then 5 that have high pressure over, but also reaching to the west, low pressure up to the north, mainly dry and mild with those. It looks as though for day 10, which I say gets us in towards the 6th of January, it looks like for day 10, East Ensembles are favouring a fair amount of high pressure dominated weather and quite mild under that high pressure potentially as well. 2 weeks time, these are the options that we've got. This gets us to the 11th of January. 10 members of the East Ensembles, low pressure out to west, high pressure to the east. Bit of a battle going on with those. He's trying to turn more unsettled. And would be pretty mild as well. Winds will be pushing up from the south. 10 with high pressure just centred over northern France. That's going to be mainly dry and mild with those. Another 10, including the ECM control run, east, interestingly, has a high pressure centred over and to the east of the country. That's going to be mainly dry and relatively cold as the winds are pulling in from off the continental landmass. 9 with high pressure just out to the west of Ireland. Low pressure as a trough sinking through northern Europe, and we could be quite chilly with those winds coming in from the north or northwest. 6 with high pressure down to the south and bringing in a mild or very mild southwesterly. And another 6 has high pressure over top of the country. So the placement of this ridge is going to be all important as we go further into January. But what we can see is that through most of those, or perhaps all of those ensemble members, is that high pressure is going to be a major player through the first half of January, which tells us that it is likely we've come to the end of the deluge for the time being. Of course, it may come back later in winter, but for now, looks like we've come to the end of the deluge. Finally, the CFS V2. For January, this is 700 millibar height anomaly for January, and if you want a cold month, look away now. It has high pressure over and to the south of the country, low pressure, let's change the colour, low pressure is up to our north, up here. We're bringing in west-southwesterlies. That is going to be a very mild month indeed. We see that within the temperature anomaly, exceptionally mild month being forecast by the CFS, not just for the UK, but through most parts of Eurasia. Actually, we saw this within JMA Friday, exceptionally mild for January. Eastern parts of America also looking very mild, but a much colder month potentially across Canada, especially around Alaska, that sort of area. It goes exceptionally cold there, but otherwise does look really, really mild for January across most of the Northern Hemisphere. And finally, precipitation for January. Well, as you'd expect with those southwesterlies, it's quite a wet month, particularly for northern and western parts of the country. You can see where the high pressure is, where it's driest over Spain towards the Bay of Biscay. Right, so a bit of an extended one today, but I wanted to bring you up to date with everything that's going on in the stratosphere. So I thought we'd have a really good in-depth look at that today. So I hope you found that first half of the video interesting and informative. That will be something to keep an eye on as we go through January, I think. It could be mid-January, might be late January. But we could, what's happening at 1 HPA in around 10 days' time, that could be the beginnings of something quite significant happening in the stratosphere for January. But otherwise, actually, for the next week, 10 days, probably the next couple of weeks, we look relatively Atlantic-driven, relatively zonal. But as we've established, and this is another reason that video's gone on for quite some time, we have got this discrepancy between the exceptionally mild temperatures at 850 HPA in the upper atmosphere and rather cooler temperatures, actually, than you might expect down on the surface, especially around the New Year period. But eventually, by the end of next week, this time next week, we probably will all be looking pretty mild with those westerly, southwesterly winds. Right, so that's it for today's videos. Tomorrow we're going to be doing weekend forecast. I'm not sure if I'm going to have time to do 2 videos tomorrow. Normally do a week to 10 day on a Saturday, but I may go and have a look at Star Wars tomorrow. Have a look at the new Star Wars film. I know one or two of you on my personal channel, one or two of you waiting for me to post my opinions about the new Star Wars film. So when I've seen it, I will let everyone know what I thought to it. I may do that tomorrow. So if I do, I probably won't have time for 2 videos tomorrow. But it is sort of still Christmas. So we shall see anyway what happens tomorrow. Right, that's all for now, though. And thanks for watching.